Controversy affects everything. It drums up a lot of attention due to a person or people involved have said, done, or was involved in something that divides public opinion, or, in the worst case, negative. It can cause the person to be quite talked about, and it could affect their career. Things behind the scenes could go poorly, and the news would cause some concern amongst those who want to give it a chance. That could affect the things that they are promoting because people don't want to look into something that they finished making before the controversy. When someone does something controversial, the reception of what they're promoting can be a bad case of wrong place, wrong time, and people write them off as really bad, even though they have not experienced it at all. On the flip side of that coin, there could be no such thing as bad publicity. There are people who want to see what the fuss is about because of the controversy. Movies like The Passion of the Christ are extremely controversial because of all the discussion of the violence in the movie, since it mostly focuses on the torture of Jesus Christ, and also Mel Gibson's anti-Semitic rants that may have added to the flames of that controversy. The latter may have made Gibson's career take a hit for a while, but the Jesus Christ torture porn movie was a huge hit, even being discussed to this day. Dogma had controversy because it dealt with religion in a way that religious groups protested the movie. Some didn't even see the movie. And yet, because of this, more people ended up seeing the Kevin Smith film than usual. But what about music? Does it have its share of controversy? Well, look at Eminem between the years 2000 and 2004 and you will get your answer. Music has been steeped in controversy for decades due to a new genre or new subgenre coming along and pushing the boundaries of what it could get away with. Gangster rap, punk, heavy metal, rock and roll have all been claimed at one point that they have contributed to the destruction of society, which caused other people to check this stuff for themselves. Even swing, blues, and jazz music were considered controversial. Jazz music was considered this because it lacked classical music structure and rules. Therefore, it was a lot more loose and improvisational. That didn't stop it from being called the devil's music back in the 1900s. That didn't keep people away from these genres either. Rather, they want to know what the big deal was. Like the aforementioned Eminem, musicians themselves get into controversy. Look at Madonna's video for Like a Prayer, Alice Cooper's shock rock stage show, and Lil Nas X in general. They have used the controversy to their advantage and the venture became quite successful. But it's not always the case, and it's not their fault, but it hurts them for longer than it should. Janet Jackson's 8th studio album Damita Joe was set for release on March 30th, 2004. There are concerns due to the fact that Joe was following 2001's All For You, which was certified double platinum in America and was critically acclaimed. This was helped by its lead title track, which was considered one of her signature hits, leading her to be titled the Queen of Radio, due to the fact that it was played on radio stations all across the board. The album was a lighter and softer version release compared to the album that came before that, which was This Velvet Rope, possibly the darkest album in her discography, and talking about that will require its own video. So with these albums, Damita Joe had very big shoes to fill. So what would be the best way of supporting the album before it comes out? What could be an event that many people will watch and know what you're selling? Football! The NFL announced that Janet Jackson would be the headline performer in the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show on February 1st. It was going to be Janet performing a melody of her songs, like her brother did back in 1993. So the night came, and she did most of her performance before Justin Timberlake surprised everyone by appearing, and both of them performed a duet of the Timberlake song Rock Your Body. We all know what happens next. Timberlake ripped a part of Janet's costume near the end of the song, and no one remembers much of the rest of the game. But in hindsight, the rest of the game should have been remembered if not for the ensuing backlash, and most, if not all of it, was directed to Janet herself, with Justin sharing, quote, 10% of it. And this moment was bad timing because the day after the wardrobe malfunction, Damita Joe's first single, Just a Little While, was released. The song received positive reviews. However, after the incident, radio and music channels owned by Viacom didn't play the song a lot, if at all. Her music was blacklisted from these formats throughout her next two albums, 4 years after this incident, which villainized Janet and it destroyed her career because of one half-second shot on screen, during which the camera cuts away before people actually noticed. And at first, people didn't notice. and that should have been the end of it. Then MTV and CBS apologized for the incident, causing news outlets to talk about it consistently and shame Janet for this act of decreasing morality in American culture by playing the clip over and over and over and over again. If you didn't see the incident happen in real time, you would have seen it in news cycles, newspapers, and internet articles, to the point to where no one talked about the streaker that ran on the field afterwards. So one can see where Joe began to suffer before it came out, because of the Super Bowl incident and its fallout, and connected to that was the release of the album itself, both the reviews and the promotion, or lack thereof. The reviews for the album were positive to mixed, which does happen to any artist who has been in the music industry for a long while. However, with Damita Joe, reviewers focused not much on the music, but on the suggestive content and the Super Bowl content instead, which is unfair due to the fact that All For You had similar concepts as Joe, which was having a lighter attitude about sex, and Janet was about sexual relationships and expressing someone's freedom through sex. This is a woman who had various songs about S&M, public sex, casual sex, masturbation, pole dancing, the list goes on and on. Her concerts beforehand were highly sexual as well, to the point where she would sit a male audience member on stage and filling him up. The main guess is being that the album cover was just too much for people almost 2 months after the Super Bowl game, though it shows that she is more carefree here than in the past. But when it was not being connected to the Super Bowl incident, it was promoted very quietly. Sure, Janet's albums weren't the blockbuster hype machines that her brothers were in the 80s and early 90s, but they were promoted. With Damita Joe, the closest I can say are the words invisible advertising. As I mentioned earlier, the backlash against Jackson caused various radio stations and musical platforms owned by Viacom to not play her music at all, which made it very hard for the album to gain any traction. Viacom revealed that they bailed on the record because the pressure was too great, and the higher-ups were still pissed off at Janet. One would think that the controversy would have helped the album if it was promoted, to the point to where 2 hit songs, I Want You and All Night, would have been certified hits at any moment in her career. But because of the blacklist against her, the album fell short to the heights of her previous album, Joe only selling 2.4 million copies compared to the 7 million copies of All For You. And listening to this album after the Super Bowl game back in 2004, was there anything wrong with it? Is it one of her best? No. But there are some really good gems here that, for the most part, people ignored because of the controversy, which again was why the album underperformed. Still, she did her best to promote the album, despite her being banned from the Grammy Awards and the MTV Video Music Awards due to the controversy, as well as not doing a tour for it, opting to work on her next album, 20YO, instead. So, after reaching nearly 2 decades, Janet finally got back into everyone's good graces. So years later, what ended up being the legacy of Damita Joe? Though it's not as well regarded as many of her works, it has been vindicated by history after all the controversy cooled down. The album was recognized not only by critics for being an underrated gem, but it also has fans amongst the music world. If you look at I Am Sasha Fierce by Beyonce and Britney Jean by Britney Spears, there is a very clear influence. The 2 albums have looked at Joe because of the concept of an alternate persona which can help further the music and explore different themes. To some, this may seem like it's been around for a while to the point where it's not noticed, but this album marks a point where one could reinvent themselves and not try to catch up with the current trend. It also helps that the person responsible for blacklisting the album and Janet herself, former Viacom CEO Les Moonves, had to step down due to sexual harassment accusation, and the album, along with the next 2 afterwards, have gotten their day in the sun years later. It goes to show that just because there is controversy doesn't mean the product is bad, and we can separate the event from the art.